In this unit of our InDesign CS6 course, we're going to set up some simple checkboxes that allow us on and off yes or no options for respondents to select when they're working with our interactive PDF form. To show you how that works, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in closer to what we're working with right down here. Let me move this up just a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my selection tool and I'm going to select this little square that we set in the print form for someone to check on or off. And in this case, we're going to set up the way that you can do that digitally. So I'm going to click on that. And when I do, it gives me the ability to set the type of forms that I want to work with, just like we had before. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, turn this into a checkbox. It'll maintain all of the attributes that we had listed before for this button. The green rectangle, the size of it, and the empty fill. And it's going to turn this same graphic element into an interactive form. Now we have all the capabilities that were available before. I can set an event for what happens when I do specific things. I have some different options for what will happen as I'm working with it. And I also have a default value that's set up for this. In this case, the default value would be yes if that button is selected. Now, we're going to apply some effects to this. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to move it over just a touch so I can see that just like so with the checkbox. And beneath here where it says appearance, you'll notice that we have a number of options available for what it looks like. So in this case, normal, if that's checked and it's on, will show a check mark, just like we see right here. Normal, if it's off, will not show a checkbox. It'll simply be blank. If I go to the rollover that's on, or the rollovers that's off, it'll show what happens when I roll my cursor over that area, whether I have it selected or not. And I also have the ability to set up what will happen with fields if I click on or click off from that field. So all of these options are available for me to select. These two are loaded in by default. I'm going to turn on and off what happens here for the click on and click off. I know what that result's going to be. I don't need to change it. But what I would like to do is I'd kind of like to stylize this a little bit more if I get into a rollover situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the appearance for my rollover on state. Then I'm going to go to the Object pull-down menu, and I'm going to go down to Effects, and I'm going to select the Outer Glow effect. Let me move this over so we can clearly see what happens as I'm working with the Effects dialog box. Now, by default, it shows a blending mode and opacity. The blending mode is set for screen, and the opacity is set for 75%. If you work with Adobe Photoshop, or you've worked previously with Adobe Illustrator, you'll recognize these blending modes. We'll leave the screen option as it's shown right here available. But what we're going to do is we're going to change this color from paper or white, which doesn't show up very strong on a paper or white background. We're going to give it another color. And the color I'm going to pick is this red here that corresponds to the R in RGB and all the swatches that we have available. Now I could also choose colors from other areas if I wanted for RGB, CMYK, or what's known as lab color. But we're just going to leave it and take it off the swatches, and then we'll apply some stylistic effects. I'm going to select that color, and I'm going to say OK. And then you'll see it kind of picks up a faint rosy glow as I'm looking at that. I'm going to change that screen opacity from 75% to 100% to make that a little bit richer. Now, I've got options for what technique I use to apply that. It could be softer or it could be precise. I'm going to select precise because what that'll do is that'll give me a larger border area to work with outside of it. Although it looks a little clunky on this screen, it'll be a better effect when you get to the PDF. And I'm going to change the size of it down to 0.0625 or a 1/16 of an inch. Now, I can set an additional spread that actually makes that richer. So in this case, it shows as bright red along the edges of my box and my check mark. Or I can soften that up a little bit. And I'm going to pick a number. We're going to say 25%. If you don't like working with this slider, you can always highlight the number and change it to whatever value you want it to be. Hit the Tab key, and it will do that as well. So I can see with the preview, what's going to happen is if I roll my cursor over that, and it's selected as on, it's going to show this rosy glow. I'm going to say OK. And as I do that, now I go to rollover off, I'll have to match that same effect. So with the rollover off that's not selected, I want it to do the same thing. I want it to light up when I'm working with it. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Object, Effects, Outer Glow, and I'm going to do the same things I had before. I'm going to change the color here to that brick red. I'm going to change the opacity to 100%. I'm going to use the technique not softer, but precise, and bring that down to a 1/16 of an inch. No noise, no spread. And what's going to happen now is if I roll my cursor in or out of there, it'll show that little glow that we're talking about. I'm going to say OK here. And when I do, it's going to show that's the effect that it's going to look like with the rollover off. It'll look like this with the rollover on. Now, it won't have that effect if we're just talking about normally selected on or off. And we're not going to check options for what it's going to do if you click on or click off. Now, if I choose, I can set this up to be required. In this case, once again, they can't complete the form and submit it unless this required form is filled out. And one thing I'd like to do, just to encourage folks to get all those Total Training latest course offerings, is I can say that that's going to be selected by default. So while it shows as a checkbox, and that'll be in there on the form, they'll actually have to click it off to not have that option selected. Think of this as opt out as opposed to opt in as we're working with the information from this checkbox. Now, I'm going to do the same thing as far as the formatting of data working with email here. I'm going to take this and I'm going to make it a checkbox. And in this case, I won't apply those effects. I want to give the value not yes, I want it to be email. I'm going to click here. Again, I want to make that a checkbox. Make sure that as I've got this in here, we'll just make it mail. And then over here, we're going to click on this one. Again, make it a checkbox and set the value for phone. In each of these cases, we've got the appearance states that have already been set, as well as the information that we have that allows us to build in what we're working for, to get the data in that we want and to get the information out that we can use.